my main conflicting point with this whole conversation of South African uh, predominance or dominance in the game is the fact that a lot of people are now coining the movement as having been birthed in South Africa. And that is where the mistake is. It was not birthed in South Africa. Um, Obviously, it is a quick and easy, I think, but that's my opinion. You tell me what we feel, but it's easy and quick to say, yeah, because it's Africa, it's nobody was present. No, 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 no. They had their different interpretation. They had, because remember there was Kwaito, and then Kwaito was his very own, creation and sound identity, sonic identity that evolved um, eventually with time. But if you remember some of the videos that actually came online on YouTube at the time, or some of Daily Motion and so on, I remember you would see like the Vinny Da Vinci is playing house, soulful house, deep house. That's really what the reference point was, and then the stuff that we were doing from here flew there eventually and became sort of like a different perspective as well, give them a different perspective on how we were doing this, doing what we were doing this side, with the influences that we had in common, but we were just doing it differently. And I think now the narrative that you're in a lot of media is, oh, South Africa, this, South Africa, that's. It's like, let's not forget Angola. Let's not forget Morocco. Let's not forget Ivory Coast with Coupé de Calais, etc., etc. So, what is your take on that?
Well, I think you have a lot more knowledge than me on that side of things, on the birth of in terms of the sound actually on the continent itself.
Okay.
My knowledge will more so come from the roots of house,
Sure.
from the States and from the UK and Europe as a whole. Because I wasn't that aware of the electronic music in different parts of Africa. I was only aware of traditional music in different
100%.
parts of Africa, and I was aware of your Vinnies and your Christos and
Yeah.
these guys. I call these guys the godfathers over there.
The other godfathers for sure.
They were definitely bringing that sound, of the house sound, to South Africa as DJs and producers. Christos was producing as well, because I picked up his Shana, which he was a part of.
Black Coffee's first band.
Yeah. So I'm not that versed on the rest of the continent and what it was doing before that time electronically. But I do know that the inspiration, of course, from we all know where the inspiration for house comes from, and that's from the States. That's from the gay clubs. That's from Chicago and New York and so on. And we can look at, we can go back and look at Afro-inspired tracks from that period. Mafumba Cultural Vibe was a huge track around '89, and that was an African vocal, and that was huge. I think it was on Easy Street label. Warrior, the Warriors that came out of the UK.
I think I heard that record.
And Crew. Coco. I've got to get the name of it right. I'll put it, but yeah, Warriors, that came out from the UK. That was, again, it was like huge at the time. That came out around '88. So these tracks were definitely showing showing the inspiration.
Thank you, Clubhead.
Yes, Mafumba. Yeah, there you go. My years are kind of screw with getting older now. But yeah, that that track was big.
But wouldn't you say that somebody as well, like Danny Tenaglia was also producing somewhat of a predecessing sound that could be qualified as Afro or
Well, it was tribal, wasn't
Africanly
it?
infused or tribal, yeah, tribal house.
Yeah,
That was the name before, right?
that was the name it was called. It was tribal. That came in the 90s. I wasn't a
Yeah.
big fan of it. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't a big fan of that sound.
Hmm.
But it's what kind of took everything to the big clubs.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It was hard, and it was drum driven, and yeah, and it kind of there was a couple of moments in there, but I wasn't a big fan of that sound.
What was your sound at the time? What was your
Well, it was always vocal. I love a song. Do you know what I mean? So I was definitely always behind anything that was vocally driven.
driven indeed? Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, that came across dance music, and also there was a lot of great R&B around the 90s.
100%, bro. Come on.
So I was also listening to a lot of R&B around that time as well. Yeah, so but there was a point I was going to make with it'll come back to me. There was a point I was going to make what we were talking about.
The African influence in disco and
Yeah, well, that's been there for some time, hasn't it?
obviously.
And to be honest with you, I don't know if we need to really keep going on about where did it originate from. Do you know what I mean? I think we need to kind of start talking about also where it's at now and how can it move forward. Do you know what I mean? I think that's also just as important, because there's so many different avenues and different opinions that will take on how it was, and I think the truth of the matter is, when you want to talk about dance music, it came from the States, period. When you want to talk about the influence of the African sounds into dance music, that was there from the early days of dance music that came from the States.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, because it comes along with that whole era of this reconnection with the African Americans going back to the continent, and these interactions between musicians and people. Very little people, well, from the new generation know, for example, that Fela Kuti was really super good friends with friends. They were actually very connected with the likes of James Brown, for example, and how they were influencing one another. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, exactly, and yeah, and I think it's also around the mid 80s there was a big revolution of us as young Black people finding out about our culture, and that was across predominantly in hip hop. It was the messages were coming through from your Public Enemies of this world and Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, and that was also coming. It was filtering into house with Jungle Brothers and so on, who was also part of that. And from there, we as Black people, we always want to express ourselves on music in terms of not culturally. We need to express that on music. Do you know what I mean? In terms of and the messages that we want to get across to our community. Music was a vehicle for that, and it always has been. And that's what was happening. That's what was happening in the 80s, around 85, 86, going on. And it was only natural that was going to start happening in house music, and it did.
True.
You know what I mean? It did start happening in house music, and people wanted to include their culture into what they loved as a music. And then from there, we saw the greats be birthed. Your Ron Trents, your Joe Clozel's, who you just have to just go back and look at their legacy of their material, and you'll hear the influence of the African culture on that. Yeah.
I could not agree more with you, brother. And to second what you just said about, it is not so important to hit the nail over and over, or the and reminding people of the origins of the sound. I hear you, but there is a necessity. No, there is a necessity because Afro House is relatively young.
Mm.
Um,
True. True.
for things to be set in stone. Why? Because I'm seeing a lot of nonsense being published out there, and a lot of journalists that pretend to be that I've heard. So uh, it's okay. I'll break it down to you this way. First thing that I've according to my observation and analysis, I've was able to gather 9 sonic revolutions in the Afro House genre.
Mm.
9 phases, which is pretty amazing if you think about it, because these 9
Mm.
phases span over 30 plus close, a little bit close, about 40 years. It's
Mm.
amazing to have nine. So okay, not that many sounds are able to make this kind of continued transition and renewing themselves. And I
Mm.
mean, and a lot of these revolutions happen very close to one another in time.
Mm.
This is how amazing Afro House has been. So according to my observation, so I took as a reference point, Tenaglia, the masters that were, the Ron Trent, Chez Damier, etc., etc. I mean, Shula Day after that, and then
Yeah.
you go, obviously you have the Alta Millers and Carl Craig, Theo Parrish, da 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 da. Then you come down to Shula Day. You got the Zepherin Saint, the Vencidos, Boddhi Satvas, and then after that you got the Jeffs, and then after that around the same time you obviously DJ Malvado and all these guys from Angola, but then you have also now Morocco. Like the revolutions really happened very fast and
Yeah.
continues to happen. So
As it did with jazz.
sorry.
As it did with jazz. Like just what as you explained there is just what happened with jazz music.
Jazz has definitely renewed itself. Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
continues to, and it's true. And I think that's our strength. But the thing is that you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from.
That's very true. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you with that.
So I don't want to sound like the boring guy that wants to always be like, but you gotta play the fact, talk about facts,
Yeah.
drop the names of those who have, because it's all, man. If with all due respect, like, pardon my fucking French, we deserve our laurels because we've been there from the get go and we continue to be there. We've opened so many doors, we've paved the way, we continue to do so. I'm not saying that we deserve it, but we're gonna take it. I don't deserve it. I'm taking it. You're taking it. We have to take what's ours. And it's our duty to make sure that we remind people that this is the history, because we're not being biased. We're just stating facts. Now, if you want to discuss facts, okay, then I mean, it's discussable, obviously, but I think one of the things that I've also noticed is in the mentality. So, for example, the mentality of soulful house music, or deep house, underground house music, as we might call it, has always been very much about brother, sister, love you. It's all about my house is your house, and we're all one family. And this is what. And remember, you and I we spoke about that before, and I think you can recall how frustrating it was for me to feel that this was couldn't be so far away from the truth. And you were like, I mean, you shared a vast amount of information with me as far as to that eventually helped me sort of like put some perspective on all that. But to this day, I think that's one of the good things about Afro House is that the new generation are very unapologetical. They don't care, and they because as you said beautifully, you referred to the hip hop and the good R&B of the '90s, that era. Those kids are now taking this because they're taking these references even more than us, and they're appropriating it in their own ways, and they're like, they have no fear to say it as it is. They won't speak between curtains about anything. they'll blast you on the internet. And yeah, it's fucked up, but at the same time, now it keeps the game in. Now it gets the game to be a bit more interesting, entertaining. You know, there's an entertainment part that's been missing in Soulful House, and I think. If we may say, Soulful House as a sound would never die, but as an industry, I think it died a little while ago. I don't know what's your take on
it. As an industry, it died. Well, you know what? My take on it is this: is that everything comes and goes.
True.
And everything comes around full circle. And when it's gone, it still keeps bubbling there underneath.
True.
And then it just takes a song or an artist to just kind of revive and bring it back up to the surface again.
I like your take on it.
That's how I feel. That's what I feel about Soulful House. You know, I found it really interesting that around 2007 to 2009 gave birth to so many record labels. With the whole digital era.
Yeah.
Right? There were so many of us that started up around that time. There was a lot that was already going on, but there was so many that kind of like came in,
launched,
and you know, gave a new vibration.
Yes, sir.
To the soulful scene. And even, I mean, you were killing it. You were doing all these mixes from like, you know, all the 90s R&B tracks and the early 2000s R&B tracks. And Rancido was doing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, he was.
Suddenly, there was a new sound that came in with the whole soulful side, mixing with the Afro, where it was just like, oh, wow, we're kind of hearing an R&B type vocal over the house beats, but it's different. There's something different about this. Do you know what I mean? So, but it came up and it lasted for 4 or 5 years when it was kind of strong with that, and then simmered again. Do you know what I mean? Everything comes back around.
Oh, I agree with you. That's without a doubt. And I think, go ahead.
And I'm just saying, and that's my take on Soulful House. Wherever it's at now is where it's at.
I get you.
It's not where I would want it to be.
And what would you want it to be? What would you want it to be? That's my
I think it's I would want it to be a lot more original.
What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot more. I think there's a formula that Soulful House has got stuck in.
Yeah.
And that formula just makes it really boring.
Just to a certain extent, you started to change that formula quite a bit. The releases you've dropped have been pushing the boundaries quite a bit. I mean, you've always been doing that, but even more so as of recently.
Yeah, I think I'm not scared to try something new. As of you, do you know what I mean? There are a few producers out there who are that way inclined. You know, Oshinlade is another one. Do you know what I mean? It's like the approach to doing soulful dance music is completely different, and it's those mindsets that make the difference, and those that just want to, this is the trend now. We go back and get a disco beat, and we just put a beat behind it, and then we're calling that Soulful House, and then you get a rush of everyone doing that, or whatever that trend may be. The sad thing is that Soulful House is falling into that trend-making business of music, and that's what's kind of made it feel killed off. Do you know what I mean? And that's a sad thing about it. With what's happened with that style, it just needs to have a bit more originality going on. People just need to just to be a bit more freer with it, and not feel that that's what's number one or number two or number three in the charts. So my next tune is going to be like that.
Yeah, that's very. I mean, business wise, it makes sense, but eventually, yeah, you. So this then calls for another question. That's a very interesting question where um, I can speak of personally because I think you and I we spoke about it some years ago when remember there was I was encountering quite a few backlash with all these R&B remixes and all these, and I really started taking these remixes to a level of actually kind of like dropping mixtapes with
Yeah,
my ancestral soul interpretations,
yeah.
and a bit of a backlash that I got from promoters, some promoters, and
Really?
so on and so forth. Oh yeah. And having had to having been called by some not directly to my face, but it's, again as a common thing in this industry, is everything is behind. Oh, he's a sellout, and I remember seeing
A sellout for what
just
reason? A sellout for what
for
reason?
bastardizing the sound by introducing more commercially appealing elements, by making it a little bit more democratized so that a wider audience can embrace the sounds that we love. But the way, as you say, the format, as you say, for example, for Soulful House, the format is such that it's not attractive to a profane audience. It might be nice to listen to, but the songs are too long. The solos are too this, da 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 da. So you got to find a way. How do you compact this whole thing? How do you make it more digestible by somebody who's never heard a song, a Soulful House joint? You know what I mean? So I
Radio
think,
edits. Radio edits.
well, I guess that's the way.
People forget the power of a radio edit.
But not
And
everybody knows how to do radio editing
yeah,
either.
and it's such a simple thing that it allows your song to have a breath of new life and get played on a radio show, because no one's going to play an 8-minute song on a radio show. Do you know what I mean? So you need to be able to kind of do a radio edit version, so you can be included. And
Yes,
it's
sir.
surprising what tracks can be included on radio shows once they have been given that kind of edit. And to go back to your point about when you were talking about people saying that you're a seller, I think that's a load of bull,
It
because
is.
a lot of the tracks and these edits that would happen gave birth to so many great ideas. Look at your Tracy Chapman,
Yeah.
for instance, and look where that went in terms of someone taking that idea and then taking it to the charts and making it a number one.
Yes,
Do you know
sir.
what I mean? So
Yes,
it's
sir.
just like, those are the things. It's just like, Tracy Chapman taking that kind of style vocal and putting that over an Afro
These kind
house
of beats. Yes.
to me. And to me, I still play that track because it gets everyone singing and it builds the atmosphere.
Always.
To me, that's not selling out. That's genius, and that's forward thinking, and showing how the sound can be interpreted across different genres.
I agree with you 1,000%, brother. And you're one of those who actually have really put into implementation and practice what you're just speaking of. As you're like, oh, because this is when your producer hat and your marketeer and just this brain of yours just start like, okay. And I'm not trying to talk on your behalf, but my perception of how your thinking process has been, because I've always been very admirative of the amazing work that you've done with Stripe and the records that you're curating and releasing. There was a thought process behind it, even the artists that you've launched. I mean, Nathan Adams and so many great vocalists that we had not heard of before. It's just the work as not only as an A&R but as a producer, to use reference point from your peers or contemporary artists, and now really doing it in terms of production and owning the rights to the song. Because of Tracy Chapman, I mean, it was the massive success in the clubs, but I never owned no rights to that song. So imagine had I had a cut a deal with them or something, you know what I mean? So this opens the way. But in all of these things, as you said, have opened a lot of ways and opportunities for what we're seeing now. But circling back, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the problem is that, and this is what I had learned from working in the major record industry and working with publishing, is that people didn't understand within the house community how to take something, a track, and make it their own in terms of or cover it basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much something that's been done for years and decades within the major industry. They cover songs, and that was really getting done widely in the house. It is now because people can see, oh, I can just cover a song and pay my MCPS and do it and get it out there, and it doesn't just have to be an edit. Do you know what I mean? So that's the knowledge I think that just wasn't around enough.
Absolutely.
Within the independent industry at that time to take advantage of what you guys were creating.
100%. And this also echoes one of the advices that Keisha had been giving me, is that, look, do covers. Stop giving away these great music for free like that. Do covers and pay, as you say, your MCPS, and release these joints, because these joints can guarantee you a lovely little income every month on your Spotify and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting how, sometimes, not having the knowledge is one thing, but putting it into practice is another, because it's resources. You need to find a good singer that knows that will be able to properly, do the cover. And then you also need to be able to recompose the song or create something original enough to be a track. So social mentioning. But point being that, to what you had referred to earlier, the very difficult choice between making money and still paying homage and respect to arts. And I think that's a very complicated balance to keep.
I think I don't know if you've heard of the notion of 1,000 fans, and on the chat, but you need 1,000 fans to make yourself a good living, right? From music, and once you've had 1,000 loyal fans and you've built that up, which in today's market isn't, it's achievable. You can make yourself a good living, a standard living. The issue is that people are out there trying to get 1 million.
That's true.
Right? And you can stay true to your art and make yourself a good living, delivering to those people who are on the same level as you.
Yes, sir.
Being consistent, delivering to them, so they know that they're getting something from you, and make yourself a living and stay true to yourself, rather than feeling, oh, I have to do this to I have to change my style to in order for me to make some money. And also, this is as producers, this is our trade. So when you learn how to produce, you also pick up other skills, and those other skills can become monetary for you, whether it's mastering for somebody else, whether it's mixing for somebody else, or you're out there doing your DJ gigs or whatever. All of this comes together and builds up your income. The problem is that people feel that I have to. And if you want to do something if you want to be that type of producer where you're doing something that's kind of like not where your heart's at, and you're happy with that, so be it. Do you know what I mean? But there are ways for you to be delivering what your heart feels,
100%,
and also earning an income from your skills of what you'll learn, what you've picked up from the industry. You know what I mean? And there's libraries, there's the publishing side of things that you can get into and deliver music to libraries on the side of what you're doing to release. And there's so many different ways, but the problem comes when people are like, I need a hit, I want to be number one, you know, I want to be that guy or that girl. I want to be that person, and that's where the frustrations start to come in, and people don't remain true to themselves.